We've come so far with these characters, haven't we? From a kitchen full of worry, to a meeting room where a father found his courage, to a small fold of savings placed back into a daughter-in-law's hands. This is my conclusion to my own take on their story, the ending I felt they truly deserved. Let me bring you right to where we left off. Diep had an idea in her hands and a blessing from her father. A little stall, a fresh start, built from bamboo shoots and the recipes this family loved. So did it happen? Did that small seed actually grow? It did. And here's how. The very next morning, Diep was up before the sun. But she wasn't alone. James was already in the yard, gathering the freshest bamboo shoots from the hillside. Juan, the man who once signed deals worth billions, was sitting on a low stool, carefully peeling each shoot the way James had taught him, choosing only the sweet low tubers. And little Nee carried small bundles back and forth, proud to be helping. They set up a simple table at the edge of the local market, no fancy sign. Just Diep's pickled bamboo shoots, her pineapple stir-fry, the raw salad everyone had praised, and a pot of duck stewed with bamboo shoots, the very dish that had started their healing. The whole family stood behind that little table, nervous and hopeful. Here's what I find beautiful about this. They didn't wait until they had money to feel rich. They built their new beginning out of exactly what they already had. Their hands, their recipes, each other. That's the secret the wealthy version of this family never knew, and the poor version finally understood. The first hour was slow. A few curious glances, one or two customers. Diep's heart sank a little, I imagine. But then a woman tasted the bamboo shoot salad and stopped. "What is this?" she asked. "It's wonderful." She bought a whole portion and told her neighbor. The neighbor told another. And slowly, word began to spread through the market. The food at the little table was made with something you could actually taste. Care. By midday, the duck was gone. The salad was gone. Diep stood there with an empty pot and a small handful of earnings, and she laughed out loud, a sound this family hadn't heard in a long time. It wasn't much money, but it was theirs, earned clean, together. But the money was never the real test waiting for this family. There was still one conversation that had to happen, one thing Juan and James had never truly spoken aloud. And what happens next is the moment we've all been waiting for. That evening, after the stall was packed away, James found his father sitting alone outside, watching the last light fade over the hills. There was something on the old man's face, something unfinished. James sat down beside him, and Juan finally spoke the thing he'd carried for so long. "Son," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. For years, I measured everything by money. I judged people by what they could give me. And I'm afraid I judged you too. When you married Diep, when you chose this simple life, I thought you'd thrown away your future. I was wrong. I was so wrong." James was quiet for a moment. Then he said the words that settled it all. "Dad, even if none of this had happened, even if the company never fell, even if the billions were still there, I would have chosen this life, not to defy you, but because Diep and Nye, and yes, even you sitting here beside me, this is the life I wanted to build. The money was never what I was after. It was always this." Juan's eyes filled, not with shame this time, with release. He reached over and gripped his son's shoulder, the kind of grip that says everything words can't. And in that moment, the last wall between father and son simply came down. Here's what touches me most about this scene. James never raised his voice to win. He didn't make his father grovel. He just told the truth, plainly and with love. And sometimes the bravest thing a person can do isn't to fight for the last word, It's to offer grace to the one who's finally ready to receive it. Then came the small moment that meant the most. Little Nai wandered out, sleepy, asking her grandfather to take her to bathe in the stream the next morning, the way she always asked. And Juan, who used to be too busy, too important, too distracted, looked at her and smiled. "Next time," he said softly, "tomorrow, I promise, we'll go together." And he meant it. A small promise. But to a child, and to a changed man, it was everything. And so, the healing was complete. Not in some grand, dramatic scene, but in an apology offered, a truth spoken, and a promise made to a little girl about a morning swim. From there, the rest began to fall into place. The stall grew busier each week. Hung finally sold the company, and the family paid down the most demanding debt, just as they'd promised the creditor. The road wasn't finished, but for the first time, they could see where it led. And it led somewhere good. The months that followed were not easy, but they were honest. The little stall became a small shop. Diep's bamboo shoot dishes became known throughout the area. Juan, the former businessman, found a new joy in something he never expected. Teaching Nai how to choose the sweetest shoots, fixing the chicken coop, sitting at a table where he was loved not for his wealth but for himself. And the debt, slowly, steadily, it shrank. Not through some miracle windfall, but through the daily work of a family that refused to give up. They kept their word to every company, paid what they could when they could, and the creditors who once threatened lawsuits came to respect the name Juan all over again. Not for his fortune, for his honesty. There came an evening, near the end, when the whole family sat together after dinner. The same prayer was spoken. Thank God for this food. The same invitations went around the table. I invite Dad, I invite Nee, I invite Grandpa. And as Juan looked around at the faces he'd nearly lost in his chase for money, he understood something with his whole heart. The secrets and shame he'd once hidden were finally gone. There was nothing left to pretend. He was not afraid anymore. He thought to himself, this is the life. This specific, ordinary, complicated, beautiful thing. The chickens in the yard, the bamboo shoots on the hillside, the child laughing in the stream, the son who chose love over fortune. This is what all of it was for. This is the part that gives me the deepest hope. Because this family proved that you can lose almost everything the world tells you to value and still end up richer than you ever were. Wealth left them, but love stayed. And love, in the end, was more than enough. On a warm evening in early spring, James and Diep sat on the steps of their simple home. Inside, Juan was telling Nee a bedtime story, his voice rising and falling, the child giggling at all the right parts. The smell of bamboo shoots still hung gently in the air. James reached over and took Diep's hand. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. They had no 5 billion, no grand company, no fancy car. But they had a paid-down debt that was finally shrinking, a little shop that was finally growing, a father who was finally home, and a child falling asleep to a story. Diep rested her head on James's shoulder. He was not chasing anything. He was just here, present, grateful. And that was more than enough. This was my own take on their story, my friends. What I felt they deserved, and what their journey meant to me. Whether life unfolds this way or another, what matters is the truth at the heart of it. That love and family are worth everything. Thank you for walking this journey with me. Until our next story together.